everyone. Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam. Again taking birth, again death. Punarapi Janani Jathare Shayanam. Again lying in the mother's womb. This samsara terrestrial entanglement is unending. Bahudustare. Iha samsare bahudustare. This samsara entanglement is difficult to cross indeed. O Murare, please save through your grace. Now, we went through the concept of the theory of reincarnation. The subject matter is not that easy to fathom because all of it happens in the realms of our ignorance. Any amount of knowledge and understanding cannot verify and certify the understanding. So it's important that we have to have a certain amount of faith in this knowledge so that you're able to expand and see a sense of certainty in what these great men are saying. Not that the entire teachings are based on lack of reason, nor are we expected to accept things on mere faith. As I've said, the whole concept of theory of reincarnation is established on the sound laws of causation, the law of cause and effect. It's also established on the law of indestructibility of matter and the law of conservation of energy. So now, a typical quality of a student is to question. And these are, in fact, if you are a true student of Vedanta, you'll invariably find that you will have questions to which you have no answers. So you should optimize and come out of your comfort zone you're in. You may have a certain shyness, you may have a certain hesitancy. You may feel when I'm connecting with you, you may think you're being challenged. Please know, you're not being challenged. We're not trying to match our wits here. I'm not trying to gauge your understanding. It's just that we are able to create an opportunity where you have a freedom to ask. Many a time we don't get this opportunity to ask and clarify from a guru or in a classroom like this. But many a time it's indeed just one way, you know. So why I'm saying this is, if there's anything that you need to clarify, you want to ask, I'm very happy to clarify any questions from what we said the previous session. In fact, I keep getting one-to-one a few clarifications, but it also helps if you open it up in the group. Others' latent queries also gets addressed. So if anyone has anything, feel free. See, I don't know what to say today. Therefore, this is an excuse. You will have to understand, how long will I constantly say? Some point you get tired, no? I am exhausted. I don't have anything more to say. So you also have to cooperate, That's what the invocation we chant. May the student and taught, the teacher strive together. I help you evolve, you help me evolve. So you also have to sometimes cooperate, help with me. Now next, the name I will utter is, he said, I knew this. I was expecting this. RPG. So you are, you're beating the queue, RPG,
And I'm what?
You are beating the queue. You were in queue earlier, but now you seem to be beating the queue and, you're leading.
No. I thought this wasn't a challenge of any sort.
No.
So, no, Guruji Hari Om, of course.
Yes.
Coming out of last time, right? We talked at length about the indestructibility of mass or matter, and then the conservation of energy. And the question is, for the person going through the process of birth one and birth two, right? This theory of reincarnation. I understand what happens to the vasanas and the desires, and because matter is neither destroyed or created, right? Created or destroyed. So my question is, for the person that's finds realization, right? And I'm still, even after you and I spoke, still a little unsure about the vasanas and the desires that they give up, right? That they no longer hold. It seems like within the context of those laws, our physical laws, our ephemeral physical laws, even those vasanas and desires should go somewhere, right? Even though they don't go to their terminal, in terms of there's nothing to take with them as they cross over to realization. But it still seems like I'm still a little confused as to what happens to those exhausted, burned, desires and vasanas.
Can you relate to the example of what happens to the vasanas? What happens to the desires of a dreamer? When you go to sleep, you do dream. A dreamer has many aspirations, many desires. He also wants to achieve something in his life. He wants to leave a mark. And there is the inevitable death of the dreamer. Now I ask you, what happens to all those desires, unfulfilled desires, even the fulfilled desires of the dreamer?
Yeah, for the waker, they don't exist at all.
Yes, exactly the same way. When we keep stretching this point to a point of maximum, and you start bothering a guru, a typical answer a guru gives is Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya.
Yeah.
So which desire are you talking about? Which birth are you talking about? What are you talking about? Yeah. The question, nor the questionnaire, none of that exists, because from the point of Brahman, that is aloneness. Yeah. So my request is, don't push the guru. Ask the guru, but don't push him. Then he'll come up with brilliant answers.
No. So the only reason I brought it up is because we were talking in the context of these worldly laws, right? and just trying to frame it within that context.
Yes.
The other is easier to understand, right? That there is only Brahman and there's nothing else. So at the realization that's actually easier. But then when you put it in the context of the worldly laws that we spoke about, that's where the mind got a little bit off track.
Yeah, but what precisely are you asking? Can you ask that in one statement? What happens to the unfulfilled, or the are you asking what happens to the desires which are exhausted? Is that what
Correct.
you're asking?
Yes.
At realization.
At realization. Yeah, because it seems with the two laws we spoke of, that again, take out all the, the thought of the Brahman and this is all an illusion. It seems like there's still something there that's left, even though because it doesn't go with the self-realized soul. It doesn't go with him. But it still seems like it must be here in this worldly sphere. And I get, for the realized soul, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
Right? And and your example, the crossing over of the dreamer to the waker, even makes it clearer now. I understand.
Yeah.
But the question was not, it wasn't a challenge to you, Guruji, I promise. It was just a true, honest, hey, what happens to this energy, this matter, because where does it go?
You are pushing me to the corner, huh? So, well, I have to resort to extreme measures now. No, I get what you're saying. In fact, what we must understand is each one is individualized vasanas. So there is perhaps seemingly a bundle that each one seems to be carrying along. It's a continuity, birth after birth. Okay, so I'm just giving you a picture. Let's say the total vasanas are 1,000 vasanas. And out of 1,000, a person comes with 100 vasanas as B1. At the time he reaches B5, he could have completely negated all those vasanas. He could have made B5 into 0, or he could have added to that total, which is known as Sanchita, the total vasanas, you could have made that as to 10,000. All right. But however it is, that bundle of vasanas is exclusive to this embodiment, or this is not to this birth, but it's to this individuality, this jiva. So these vasanas are not something which are transferable. So the question is, when a person attains realization, what happens to those exhausted vasanas? See, realization is said to be a state you attain when one has completely exhausted the vasanas. So a state of vasana-lessness is a state of realization or perfection. That's what is said. Now, remember, I taken the example when we connected earlier, that a vasana being exhausted is akin to a vasana which never existed. I took an example of a vasana for alcohol. You would agree with me that I have no vasana for alcohol. So a vasana for alcohol I do not have, it doesn't exist in me. So there's no question of it being changed or transformed into another form, or it being considered as an existential energy. It is not there. The entire energy, the subtle matter, is in the form of thought. It is very subtle. So if it can be, and in fact not if, when it is uprooted from its very root, there is no question of it to sprout any further. So Eradicating a vasana is uprooting a tree from its root, not chopping out from its branches or trunk. Even when you chop a tree off the trunk, the tree is still alive. So if we can draw a parallel that when you uproot a tree from its root, there is no question of any further germination or no further growth. There's no life left there. So you have to come to terms with this. When a vasana is exhausted, there's no form of any energy left. It disappears, it vanishes. If there is any kind of, then there's no question of attaining realization. Then realization becomes a myth, because if we argue that there has to be that energy in some form, that means I'm still holding on to it in traces or in residue. In some sense, it's still there in me. And that becomes an impediment to my realization, isn't it? Therefore, the fact that one attains realization, it's said to be a state of emptiness, nothingness, a state of mindlessness. In fact, in deep sleep itself, all of us experience a state of nothingness, don't you? You know that experience, isn't it, Arviji? When we go to sleep, there is that quietude. Now, you can also ask me, then what happens to the vasanas then? Where are they? Temporarily they are not there. It's also possible permanently they are no more. So it's difficult for us to justify that this law would apply to something which never exists. It only applies to something which exists, which only justifies the continuity of birth one to birth two. I don't know, I have not said anything new to you, but you'll have to come to terms with it. Okay, Ji? Right. Yeah, Vijay Raghavanji, you wanted to say something?
Pranam, Guruji.
Namaskar. Good to have you back, sir.
Thank you. Guruji, I have a small confusion. While we are talking about vasanas and unfulfilled desires, when we transit across from one birth to another, whatever, through a death, where do these consequences of good deeds or bad deeds, what we call papam and punyam, where do they stand? I mean, by same law theory of cause and effect, if you have done a good thing, you are supposed to have some effect, if not in this birth, next birth, by the same logic, and vice versa about whatever we do. And correct. How does that go across? And while we talk about once we get a realization, we burn out the desires, burn out vasanas, what happens to these unsettled accounts? I mean, maybe I'm sounding a little crude and mechanical, but what happens to them? I mean, like I can, by doing more and more good deeds, do I annul whatever effect of papam I have done earlier?
In fact, the part of the question was the question I had given homework to these people, isn't it?
Yes. Nobody is about it. That's why I came across it.
Nobody is talking about it. All collectively, they have formed a union. Some students' union you people have formed. Some wisdom union against me. I've given homework, and they're not talking about it. I'm sorry. When I started the class, I was a blank. I don't know what to say. Nobody is saying, Guruji, there was a question you had given, and I tell you, I will also going to form a union now against you all. We will take up that part of the question when we open the floor for that. But I wouldn't be answering that because I'm sure some have already given thought to it. I would like to hear from them. But other part of the question you're asking, is there anything other than this?
No.
Okay. It's just you're asking what happens to the good and the bad karmas one incurs. Are they carried forward? Are they exhausted? What happens in case of a man of realization? Isn't it?
Generally my understanding is that if vasanas can be carried over, I suppose that should also be carried over.
No comments. I shall wait for the answers. I don't want to give away anything because these people are too smart out there. Right. We'll come to that, Vijayji. Vanita Ma, I see you have put in a question. Could you please explain? Identify the questioner. Is it the hidden questionnaire?
Yes, it's Anand.
Ma, my request to you is either the computer screen comes little low or Anandji comes little up.
He's been pushed down like that.
Sir, same state, sir. Same state. I am also in same state, sir. Ask anybody, same state. RPG, same state, isn't it? Ask Srinivas Reddy Garu, same state. Everybody in same state, sir. So we have to get together, form a union, sir.
Vamana Association.
ANMO Association will form very soon. Yes, sir. What is the question, Anandji?
So if you're a human being, what makes you come back, number one, which kind of you've alluded to, and if there is all good, and my theory was that there is a good versus bad, and there is a balance. And depending on that, if there is more good, you come back as something, and if there is more worse things that you've done, then you come back as a cockroach or something. Is that true, or is that a misrepresentation of our understanding?
See, I remember saying, I don't know in which context, which session I mentioned, but having born as a human being in this chain of evolution of human species or living species, it is said human being is the most evolved of all living beings. Now, even to justify that, if you compare a human to an animal, any animal or a plant or a mineral kingdom, these are other kingdoms around us, the capacity of what a human being is designed with, no other species has got that. See, a human being has got the subtle element, which is a most versatile mind, a mind which has got variety of emotions. You know, animals have certain emotions, but not to the extent what a human being has. A wide spectrum of emotions. And also only a human has got a fully developed intellect. An intellect which can conceive or posit the existence of a transcendental entity. No other creature can conceive a transcendental. Now, these subtle forces take a long time to evolve. So human is the highest in the chain of births. So having put in so much of effort, which you and I are completely oblivious, we do not know how many janmas, how many incarnations, how many births we have gone through to evolve to this state. Obviously, we've evolved from the other kingdoms, from the mineral to the plant to the animal, and then to the human. So having born as a human, and you say, because let's say I've done some very terrible karmas, is it possible for me to transport it to an animal level? In the context you said, being born as a cockroach, where everybody detests me and hates me, and it's an insipid life. Is it possible to be transported? No. The forces act against you that you will not be deteriorated to that extent. Practically, it's not possible. But theoretically, they say, if you, okay, before I ask you this question, can you tell me what is it that drives you from experience to experience? What is it that drives you from birth to birth?
Hope and desire.
No, let's put aside the hope. It is your desires and vasanas, isn't it? You get that the vasana or the desire is that driving force, isn't it? Now, let's say if I am entertaining a desire to be destructive, I'm extremely rajasic, I'm extremely destructive in my thought nature, and I'm not able to allow that expression of destruction. So a possibility is you would be born as an animal, where you'll be born as a lizard, or you'll be born as a carnivore, where you have a license to kill. And in the process of that birth, you have actually exhausted the desire to be destructive. So what I'm trying to establish in this argument is the vasana we have is superior to the environment. Environment is a product of your thought. Remember, it is your thoughts and vasanas that control and command and govern everything around you. So if I entertain a conscious vasana or a thought, nature will give you an environment to go and satisfy it. So watch out what thoughts you're entertaining. So if there is a vasana in me which is not being able to be fulfilled or fructified in this birth, I will leave this embodiment, perhaps be born as an animal just to fulfill that particular vasana, and the subsequent birth, B3, if B1 is this embodiment, B2 is an animal incarnation, I'll be born as an animal, exhaust that particular vasana, and since I have not, there's no more vasanas for that birth, I exhaust, come back to the cycle of the human. But it's all we must understand is everything is driven by vasanas which create the experience. So it's a vasana that creates the embodiment. So much so, it is said, it is the child that chooses the parentage. It is said in the same argument. So if I were to conclude with this thought, it is a child choosing the parent. Now, what is that akin to? The child here is what, Anandji?
That would be desire.
I'm asking Anandji.
My guru has told me that.
Correct. But her guru is talking to you now. Yeah. So the child is the vasana and the parents are the environment. Isn't it? So suddenly one evening you decide, you tell at home, let's all go for a dinner. Let's go for a change somewhere, you know, just for a change. You say, let's go to an Italian restaurant. Now, the mere moment you have a desire to have Italian food, what happens thereafter? You're just shortlisting. There are 2-3 restaurants out there from your past experience that was not good. Perhaps the other one was nice and they had a good experience there. Let's go there. So the fact that you had a thought of having Italian food, doesn't that create a half an hour later, you're actually in that physical environment, in that restaurant, enjoying the food? How did you end up in that restaurant? Is it not the thought or the vasana? So it is a thought and vasana that creates an environment. The world is a product of your thoughts. In fact, the world is a projection of your thoughts. Nothing more, nothing less. The entire world that you're living in is actually choreographed before in your mind, before you experience it. So watch out what is being choreographed within. Of that you have control. That's what this wisdom is. You have a control over the procession of thoughts that's happening within. So you can give it a direction. You can edit it. You can actually end it. If you end within, it is the end of any further rebirth. It is known as to be a state of no further birth, state of realization, where there's no more vasanas. So in answer to your question, it is not possible for one to be deteriorated into an animal birth, but you could be born as the lowest of human beings for the wrong deeds perhaps you have done. You have perpetrated certain actions. You have no choice but to face the consequences. Watch out. You think nobody has watched me, but the divine law is taking into account every action of yours. An action means even a passing thought or an impulse will incur karma. Watch out. If I entertain some passing thought instantly, sir, if I have a hatred towards someone, the moment the thought of that person comes, there's a little hatred, a negative emotion comes. What is the consequence of that emotion?
It could be bad and evil thoughts. It could be, it depends on what it is.
No, it doesn't matter what that is, but in your mind, you have entertained some negative emotion. Now, what's the karma of that? What's the consequence of that? Immediate consequence, I'm telling, as far as you're concerned, what is the consequence of a negative emotion? Am I sounding that difficult, Anandji?
No, but the negative emotion may be because you want to make sure that you have, suppose some bad deed was done. As a consequence of that, you have a negative emotion. You're trying to fulfill your desire to extinguish that problem in your mind. Suppose someone harms you. How do you, your thoughts in your head could be, I can forgive him.
Correct.
Or that is an exalted soul. You could forget the whole problem. That could also, that could be, you can say, that's all that follows buddhi. Or
Correct.
You may say, you know what, I want to take revenge. That is also a very appropriate thought.
No. I'm not saying it is right or wrong. I'm only saying when somebody does something to you, as you rightly said, you can choose to forgive that person, or you can choose to entertain a certain emotion with a certain animosity or hatred towards him, that you have to give it back to him. But when you entertain an attitude of forgiveness, what is the state of your mind? There is a sense of you are at peace, because that is his buddhi, alba buddhi, as they say. I remember there was a movie, I don't know the title, but in that movie, there's something called a chicken intellect. Chick intellect. That fellow has got an intellect of what? Only chick. Chick intellect, he has got. So what else can you expect from a chick intellect? That's what it will do. Chicken intellect is got. Alpa buddhi. So you forgive that alpa buddhi. So you are at peace within yourself. Instant karma. I'm trying to tell you, at the thought level also, karma functions instantaneously. The moment you are at hatred and anger and envy and jealousy or any of these negative emotions, instant karma is I have lost my mental balance. I'm not my normal self. Karma functions. I'm only trying to tell, every action, there is a cause and effect, and that consequence haunts you, including the next birth. So it will not go anywhere. You have to face the consequences. So better watch out what seeds I'm sowing. Because the law of nature is only facilitating fructification of your vasanas. Write down these words, please. Nature is only facilitating the fructification of your vasanas. It is very, the law is not fair to someone, unfair to me. No. The most powerful driving force is the thought or vasana. And if you entertain it, everything will make its way for its fructification. So better be careful what thoughts and vasanas you are entertaining.
What about the flip side? We always think about, you do this bad thing, something is going to happen. But what about the good? How does that, what happens with a supreme being who is not having any bad thoughts, or is doing good, or doing seva, whatever it is, whatever you consider is good? How does that go in this algorithm?
I don't get you. I'm sorry. Could you come again? What are you asking here?
So we always focus on the negative thought, this will happen. What about the good thought? What happens then?
Same consequence. Same consequence. In fact, there's a couple of verses in the Gita which says, Prapya punya krutam lokan ushitva shashwati samaha suchinam shrimatam gehe yoga brashto bhajayate athava yoginam eva kule bhavati dhimatam etad vidurlabhataram. He says, if you do the good work here, if you lead a life of service and sacrifice, you will be born into the family of the wise and the wealthy. Look at the assurance with which he speaks. In fact, let me give you the exact reference. I think it comes in the 6th chapter. Illama? Rajima, 6th chapter dane. Huh? Enna Anand? Anybody got the reference to that? Hariji, which
Guruji, verse 40 and 40 or 41 of
correct. Chapter 6. Correct, sir. Yes. It's chapter 6, verses 41 and 42. You know, as I've said, Prapya punya krutam lokan ushitva shashwati samaha suchinam shrimatam gehe yoga brashto bhajayate. He says, having attained the worlds of the righteous and dwell there for eternal years, he who has fallen from yoga is born into the family of the pure and wealthy. Means he's talking of a person who's striving in the spiritual field, who's done yeoman service, he's done great tapas, he's done so much sadhana, but he has fallen short of attaining realization. He has not attained moksha. For what is karma? He has not attained it. What happens to that person? He says, here is a man who will be born into the family of the Suchinam Srimatam, the pure and the wealthy. And the next verse he says, Athava yogina meva kule bhavati dhimatam etadvi durlabhataram loke janmayadi drisham, which means, or he is born into the family of the wise yogis only. Verily, a birth such as this is very difficult to obtain in this world. Look at the certainty with which Lord Krishna speaks, or the great Vyasas speak. If you do good, for some reason you're not attained salvation, you are born either into the family of the pure and the wealthy, or a very rare embodiment is you'll be born into the family of the wise yogis only. So your parents will themselves be of such a high spiritual caliber, they themselves with the guru. So in the very early stages of your journey, you attained salvation. But you just needed that little experience in the next birth. You needed that little push. You need to be born. So in the very early stages, you attain realization. So the rest of your life, you are a realized soul. It is said, sir. It is spelled out. Perhaps it is not as explicit as spelled out anywhere in the Shastras, but these two verses. Take a particular note. He is saying where you will be born, how you will be born, what environment you will choose. I suppose this should satisfy Ji.
Yes.
Anandji, are you good for now?
Yes, thank you.
Most welcome, sir. Right. A few of them had clarified.
Hari Om Guruji.
Yes, Hariji.
If I remember correctly, then it was not last class, before that. When we broached the topic of theory of incarnation, you said that you will try to explain us using the law of parallelogram forces. You know. Do you think that it can also explain some of the queries which were brought in this class?
What is it that you are suggesting, Ji?
No, you said that you will try to explain to us about theory of incarnation using the parallelogram law of forces.
What is that?
No, you only told that was not last class, before that, when we broached the topic of theory of incarnation.
Sir, I have no memories of past, sir. No, I know.
I know a
there
bit
was,
of it, but I thought it is better it comes from your mouth.
no, I've got a starting problem. Can you please kickstart it?
Yeah, it is generally we have a concept that if I did something 1, then I will get a reaction of 1. If I do something 2, I will get a result of 2. But then I have got hundreds and thousands of desires, which will not act one by one. It will all act together and form a resultant desire. I thought it is better it comes from your mouth so that everybody gets the idea.
Right. See, the concept which Hariji is talking about is the parallelogram law of forces, or the law talks about the resultant direction an object would go when more than one force acts upon it. When more than one force acts upon an object, the direction the object would go is the resultant of the forces. It doesn't go in any one specific direction of the force that acts upon an object. So, how do you establish the parallelogram law of forces? If going by the discussion, we have just said it is the vasana or the desire that creates environment, isn't it? Go back to that statement when I was answering Anandji. I said, it is your vasana or desires that gives environment. And yet you will say, sir, I don't have a desire to die. I don't want to die. And yet, why do I die? Why does a person die? This is because of the resultant forces. The resultant forces, they determine an environment which this current environment cannot fulfill what desires or vasanas you entertain. I have no desire to leave this embodiment. I have no desire to go anywhere else, but I have other vasanas which can't be fulfilled here. So where you go, you may have no specific desire for it, but yet the fact that you are there is because of the resultant. That law of forces is known as the parallelogram law of forces. Am I right, Hariji? Just thumbs up. Yes or no? Ulta thumbs up. That's all. So now, okay, na? So this is the concept which conveys certain areas which we are not clear how it all functions. Again, there's a law which substantiates it. I remember mentioning it a fortnight ago. I'm glad you brought it up, and I'm able to draw a connect to the thought flow. So it's not one desire that determines your future. It's the resultant, which is the cumulative effect of all the thought forces that have acted till now.
Including free will.
Now, free will is what that has been deciding those thought forces. You have the freedom to checkmate them, or the freedom to do what you want, or entertain them, isn't it? So that's an understood aspect. Okay?
Yeah.
Right, Ji. I'm not expanding on it. It's a deep subject, but when we are ready for it, when someday we'll crop it up, we'll take it. Okay. Now, Ushama is asking about the carriage of vasanas from one birth to the other. Will the same vasanas be carried forward? The question seems very simple, but the answer is actually a little complex. I'll not complicate it, just to make the understanding clear. The question is, when you are born, are any vasanas from this birth are carried forward? How do I answer this question? Let me surrender to someone. About the carriage of vasanas from one birth to the other. Will the same vasanas be carried forward? I don't think so. What do you mean same vasanas? Oh, this then Janma, I've got vasana for, what was that, Rajima?
Ice cream, Guruji.
Ice cream. What is it you gave the other day? Yesterday also you're talking about?
Kamar cut, Guruji.
Vasana for kamar cut. Kamar cut enna theriyuma Ushama? Okay. What we will do, we will supply you with little kamar cut. And at the end of the day, you will entertain a vasana for kamar cut. Now the question is, I have vasana for kamar cut. Is it kamar cut vasana also going to be the next birth is the question. Not necessary. See, we can't say with any certainty. Because every, as I've just said, the resultant, it's possible that there could be an unfulfilled desire is carried forward. But if a desire or vasana is exhausted, that is not going to reappear. That understood. But if there is an unfulfilled desire, you must understand principally a person leaves this embodiment and picks up another embodiment because this environment cannot satisfy the vasanas and desires you are entertaining. That's the thumb rule. I have a certain bundle of vasanas or desires which cannot be fulfilled here. So I need to choose another environment to fulfill them. Therefore, I leave this embodiment and go and pick up another one. They could be fresh desires. They could be certain unfulfilled desires. I'm not able to get this. So you carry it forward. I'm just answering it from a very superficial level. So I think this would do for now. If I were to start throwing new terms into the equation, it will leave everybody, including me, confused. So it will be a confused lot at the end of the class. So we don't want to get into that state, I'm sure. So yes and no answer. So you're not wrong in choosing anyone. Ushama, are you clear? Is it okay? But principle, what we're saying is unfulfilled desires is that is carried forward. Okay, right. Dr. Surendra Garu.
Greetings and pranam Swamiji and Master Garu.
Namaskar, sir.
So there have been so many questions and discussions that came through in the last hour. I just want to make one point in reference to the last discussion. Do the vasanas from the previous life carry through? My understanding is that they do in a certain way. The reason I would say that is, people are born with certain tendencies right from the childhood. Somebody's good in math, somebody's good in science. Somebody has a musical talent. Somebody has a great memory. Somebody has a certain, sportsman, etc., etc. And that is explained or reconciled, I should say, based on the Puravasanas, I suppose. So that's the only way to explain why somebody would be so extraordinary talent in a certain way, certain line, whereas and over and above everybody else, so to speak. That's the only way to explain it, is what I've been told. And continuing the same discussion, it's my understanding there are so many terminologies with regards to karma, the Sanchita karma, Agami karma, Kriyaman karma, Prarabdha karma. So many karmas are discussed and mentioned in our literature. Sometimes can be confusing, but the way I was made to understand is that it's like we are born with a bank account. It is based on the bank account you created yourself as a cumulative previous births. So in this birth, manasa, vacha, karmani, just try to think about it. And you're already some way impacting that bank account. So if your bank account goes up, goes down, depending on good and bad things you do. And at the end of the end, so a certain bank account you're allowed to spend in this life. And certainly it gets add up. The only way you will attain self-realization is you no longer have any bank account. Even if you have a lot of bank account, good bank account, that could actually, as you had previously discussed, you're born into better and nicer environments. And however, you're not attained self-realization. So the idea is to exhaust all that and become a desireless state, to get to the desireless state. Of course, Lord Buddha talked a lot about that.
Become a pauper.
Yes, pauper of all possessions and all accomplishments, possessions and connections and everything.
Correct.
Desireless state. Na prajayana karmani tyagane ekam amritatvam manushu. That's the state we have to reach, is what my understanding. Thank you, Master God.
Right. Namaskar. No, wonderful. In fact, you have clarified it very well. In fact, you have used terms which I didn't want to use. In answering to Shama, I said there are certain terms, if I use, I'll have to justify them. You mentioned the Prarabdha karma, Sanchita karma, Agami. These are all terms which needs to be expanded, and we need time, and we don't have the luxury of that. But I agree with you that it's like a huge bank account, and we all have access to it at birth, and they are guaranteed exhaustion and so on. And so I agree with you, and you're 100% right, sir. Ushama,
thank
you. Whatever Dr. Gara said is apt and is correct, but we'll make sense of those terms some stage, okay? Right. Anuji, you mentioned a comment here, the law of natural selection evolved to higher form. In what context you said, sir?
Well, I think we're talking about that you evolve into higher beings. Like you were saying, can anybody go back to being an animal kingdom?
Mm-hmm.
The law of natural selection, which is part of like a genetic algorithms, what we work on in the data world, essentially says that you're always evolving into better and better form.
Correct.
So that's what I was saying, that, that it's, so law of natural selection says that you always evolve into higher being.
Correct.
So if you're in a human form, that even if you have done bad deeds, you may come back as a human, but you may perform something else which are not conducive to what you really would like to see in any human.
It's true. Very, very well said. It's every birth philosophically is evolution. In fact, death is progression philosophically. Birth is devolution. So when somebody dies, it is said that you have exhausted your vasana. So you have actually evolved. So you're right. Everything is, nature is only working in with one purpose, to make us evolve. There's nothing other than that, isn't it? Very rightly said, sir. Okay, Padmini Ma is asking, what about having siblings with different vasanas born to the same parent? Yes, so each child has chosen that particular environment which is conducive for that particular child. So the parents is nothing but a conducive soil. So the parents present themselves as a conducive soil, or the environment is conducive for the vasa to fructify. So I don't see any concern there. Vaitama further asks, does that mean a child who dies is very lucky, even though it causes anguish to the family? There is nothing lucky or unlucky here. We're talking about, we have said earlier, there's nothing abominable at death. There's nothing terrible in death. Death is only change of environment. And the change of environment is determined by the vasanas, your entity. So philosophically, you've just moved on. You've chosen another environment. Here, in this case, it's just the physical body has changed. Just like you left home and you went to a restaurant. You've just changed environment. For what purpose? To exhaust your vasanas. So when a person moves on, it's just that the vasanas, this body is no more fit for the vasanas. You know, in the second chapter of the Gita, it is said, it's like, you know, which is that verse? Vasam sijirnan yatha vihaya. You know, just like one gives up these garments and picks up new ones. Just like that, the embodied gives up this body and picks up another body. That's all. You know, so it's just a change of environment. Sorry, Rajima.
Chapter 2, verse 22, Guruji.
All right, there you go. Chapter 2, verse 22. That's a reference to that verse. All right, okay. Yes, Harish, please.
Hariom, Guruji.
Yes, Harish.
Yeah, Guruji, I have a bit of a confusion on some question asked earlier by Anandji. We were talking about if somebody has a propensity for a vasana to kill or commit violence. You mentioned earlier that from a human life, the person will be born an animal to complete the vasanas and has a license to kill, B2. And then when the vasana is exhausted to kill in the jungle, for example, you come back to B3, back to a human.
Yes.
Then subsequently, a few minutes later, another student said, we had a discussion, then you had said that the individual who commits sins or very decadent life will come back to a very low, the lowest quality of human life. So I'm just confused on this difference of going from B1 to B2 back to B3, and then on the other side, we go back to the lowest quality of human life. So I'm just confused which would determine which in that aspect between those two questions posed by two different colleagues.
See, in all contexts, there is just a continuity of a human birth. You could devolve in that sense, means you could be born into a particular environment to exhaust a particular vasana, as a human. But this being born into a life of an animal is only theoretical. It doesn't really happen. As I said, the forces are acting way against you to get into that kind of an embodiment. But if you're so particular, if you're entertaining very powerful vasanas for something which you're not able to get an environment to fructify, nature is against it. So providence will give you an environment where you can have a license to express and exhaust that vasana, because that vasana is actually becoming a hindrance to you. So it's a license to burn off that vasana through a particular embodiment. For example, if somebody leading a very lazy life, very tamasic life, perhaps you will be born like a hippopotamus or a frog. Okay, because a lazy life, lifeless life. So, but forces in human act against it. So you just go back to the thought of B1, B2, B3 is nothing but a continuation of a human birth. Okay?
Yes, Guruji.
Does it help?
Mostly. So basically it's fair to say there are rare exceptions on the quotient of the vasanas. Are there rare exceptions? I mean, that's what I understand.
Yes.
Generally, not the rare exceptions under these extreme circumstances.
Yes. Yes, it's a rare exception. But it does happen. So actually, we are saying, watch out. If you demand for it, you will get it.
Okay.
Only thing is, people will come and watch you then. African savannah. People will come and watch you. So if you want that, why not? You know. In fact, I keep getting that comment very often by the family, because if at all I'm watching television, I'm always watching this National Geographic Animal Planet. And my daughter comes and tells me, Daddy, you will be next Janma, you will be born as one of these animals, she'll say. So I hope that possibility and rarity remains a very rare spectacle. In other words, it becomes a reality. You know, I don't want that to happen. Okay. All right, Harish.
Thank you. Thank you.
Most welcome. Right. Soumyama is asking a question. If I only wish I could get back my speech and music in my next birth, will it be possible? Indeed. If you have such powerful desire for music and for reasons obvious, you are not able to exhaust them, here is a vasana which will carry forward, and you'll be a prodigy. Right from your early stage, you will be you'll have an environment where you will excel, and you will exhaust that vasana undeniably. I can understand where you're coming from. All right. Yes, Vijayji.
Guruji, I have a small doubt. Is the choice of environment in the next birth alone is the sum total consequences of what you have done before? The reason I'm asking is that there have been a lot of references of incident to incident, you know, like you did that in that previous birth, so exactly this is what is happening to you back. I mean, even in even Ramayana, Mahabharata also, there are references to that, you know, you did that in that Janma. And so exactly that is being paid back to you now, good thing or bad thing. Where does that come in? I mean, like if the moment you get a choice of birth, you have explained it, I mean, thoroughly. Then after that, your vasanas take over. In the broad framework of the birth you have got within that. Now, how do they link incident to incident? I mean, like for instance, I'll give you a very crude example. I mean, you talk to someone and say that, you know, you kicked a dog, and somebody says you must have been a dog, and I mean, you must have kicked a dog before, so your same thing is happening to you. You know, something, I mean, silly examples I'm giving. So how does that work?
See, each experience adds to your account. It's like going by the example Dr. Surendraji had taken, each transaction results in the the net bank balance, whether be it you have taken a credit or a debit, it reflects in your total transaction. But that particular transaction has, you must understand, has influenced the total net balance. It has to, because it's only a chain. So, but yet that the resultant is a net balance, you must understand. So going by the parallelogram law of forces, the concept we said, even though each action contributes to it, the environment you're born into may be too diverse or too far away from a particular vasana or a particular act you could have done, because it gets dwarfed in the macrocosmic scheme of multitude of actions and effects. But it will influence to the extent how potent is that cause, to that extent that that effect will influence the resultant. But it will be difficult to take out, I've done that, this happens. If you have the perception, if you have that acuteness to be able to connect, then perhaps even in the course of one's life, the law works at equal levels, If I do material good, I am benefited materially. If I do physical harm, I'll be hurt physically. If I do emotional service, I am benefited emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. So if I'm striving to bring about a spiritual evolution in you all, the direct effect of that is I am evolved spiritually. So the law works at each levels. It's not that I touch a hot pan and something happens to me at the spiritual level. Nothing will happen. My finger will be burnt at the physical level. That's all. It will not affect my material quotient. Only my physical, it's affected. So the law works at all levels of the personality. So we have to understand how the law works. But it will be difficult to single out, because can you tell me how many actions are you performing or perpetrating in a day?
Millions. No. I suppose. I mean, most of the things we are not conscious of. Yes. And yet you incur a karma for a thought as well. So everything adds up. So it's difficult for us to single out. So we'll have to understand the principle and leave it at that. All right. Okay. Looks like the floodgates had opened up today. RPG? Correct, huh?
Yes, Guruji. I don't know how.
You started it. I didn't. No, it's not me. Everybody knows that. I didn't. It's all.
You started the question.
I started this question. You started that. Chain reaction.
But you made the offer. I only accepted the offer.
Who told you to accept it? And see what is the effect of it now. No. It's in fact there's so much to ponder. There's so much to scrutinize, so that you start unfolding the hidden layers. Your
question.
Sorry,
we never answered your question from last week.
Yes, that's why I said I will just given the answer, and then perhaps we'll expand on it. The question we asked. What was the exact question? RPG, you have that question with you?
Oh, am I on? Okay. When a person dies, what is carried forward from birth 1 to birth 2?
Yeah. So when a person dies, what is it that is carried forward along from B1 to B2? If we all agree that we could just stretch the session by another 5-10 minutes, we can open up and get a feedback. Is it okay? Another 5-10 minutes. Are you okay? Or we can come back to it, whatever. Okay. I will certainly revisit it, but I'll just want to clarify it. When a person dies, the things that are carried forward first, the thing that is carried forward is, as you know, the definition of birth and death is a transference of subtle body and causal body from one gross body to another. So it is the content, the inner content, the subtle matter is that which is carried forward, which is your vasanas and desires. So when a person dies, the first thing that you carry forward is your vasanas, unfulfilled vasanas that is carried forward. Exhausted vasanas, they are not carried forward, they are burnt out. Anything that is left unfulfilled are carried forward, point one. Point two is the consequences of actions which have not yet fructified. If you have done certain actions, as you know, the Newton's third law, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. There's a cause and effect. So if you have performed an action and that action has not expressed the fruits of that action, you will carry forward the fruits of your actions which has not been fructified, which have not been expressed, which has not been burnt out. So the fructification of your performed actions or the fruits of your actions is like the wood being burnt out by fire. Once the wood is burnt out, there's only ashes, there's nothing left. So if I have done an act, let's say if I've done a noble act, I experience punya. I get merited for my good deeds. If I done selfish acts, I incur papam. I accrue demerit. So it is certainty that it is not possible that every action you perform, you have actually experienced the fruits of all those actions. So you will carry forward the punya or the papa, which are the effects of your unselfish and selfish deeds you have performed in this birth. And thirdly, you carry forward. What else you carry forward? Saitaramanji, what's the last thing? Oh, there's one more thing. Perhaps there's more. I can't talk with certainty, but there are three things I wanted to bring it up. One, we said unfulfilled vasanas. Second, we said is your karmas. What else? Yes, sir. Hariam, sir. Any idea, sir?
This knowledge, wisdom.
The spiritual quotient you have acquired in this birth. The spiritual quotient you have acquired or attained at the time of death, which is measured with the wisdom you have, that is carried forward. So, in other words, the first is the ignorance in the form of your vasanas, the karmas, and the spiritual evolution in the form of wisdom is carried forward. I repeat, the ignorance in the form of your vasanas, second is your karmas, the third is the spiritual wisdom. So if I die this birth and I'm at 70% spiritual evolution, I will start from 71 next Janma. But all the erudition and scholarship, all the literary skills, all that other talent I have, all the words I have to start A for apple, B for ball next birth. Nothing of that information is carried forward. I'll have to start. everything else is left behind. Everything else. Nothing else is carried forward. Ready, Garu? All okay?
Pranam Guruji, fine.
Yes, sir. So if we are smart investors, we got to invest your life into this. The only thing that's carried forward is this.
But one thing, Guruji, I think we have too much of, that's my feeling, we have too much of curiosity with the future Janmas than the current one. Pardon me, it's not, I think it's my opinion. I think the amount of new things, brainstorming happening there.
No, I found it legitimate to clarify because that was the context of the verse we were discussing, you know. And these are subject matters which need to be appeased. There is no way we need to allow them to linger. We should not allow, if there are any concerns, to linger. Just let them appease and we understand. So that the focus next class will come back to this birth. Otherwise, you know, it will be going on into the next birth. So I agree with you. So next class will come back to this birth. Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Harishi, anything you wanted to say? I'm sorry, you wanted to clarify something earlier.
Yes, Guruji, but that was a long time ago and very much more has been said, which is much more enlightening. I was wanting to say something which would have been at a much more layman or lower level. So we can let it pass.
Okay, appreciate. Sorry for that. I know you had raised, but then didn't get a chance. Appreciate. We'll come back. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.